The encrypted message arrived at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, right as I was debugging code that had been giving me hell all week. Give me 70% in the divorce or you'll never see Sam again. Attached was a selfie of my wife Clara and some muscle-bound jackass at a rooftop restaurant, both grinning like they just won the lottery. I automate code for a living, but I can't debug my wife's poker face. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name is Rowan Pierce, and until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. 40 years old, decent job as a software project manager at a tech firm in Hartford, nice condo, 10-year-old son who actually liked hanging out with his old man. Sure, Clara and I had been having our issues, but what marriage doesn't hit rough patches after 12 years? Turns out some rough patches involve your wife screwing a contractor named Oliver Kane. I stared at that photo for a solid 5 minutes, my coffee growing cold while my brain processed what I was seeing. Clara looked radiant in that selfie, more alive than she'd seemed in months. Her blonde hair caught the restaurant's ambient lighting perfectly, and she was wearing that black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary. The same anniversary she'd claimed to be too tired to celebrate properly. The guy next to her, Oliver, I assumed, had that gym bro energy that screamed, "I peaked in high school but refused to admit it." Cocky smile, perfectly styled hair, the kind of guy who probably called everyone bro, unironically. He had his arm around Clara like he owned her. Maybe he did. I saved the photo and started thinking. Clara had been distant for months, claiming she was swamped with real estate deals. Her agency, Winfield Properties, was supposedly booming. She'd been taking more business trips, staying out later, and treating our son Sam like an inconvenience rather than the kid she used to dote on. Sam? Jesus, what was I going to tell Sam? My phone buzzed with another message from Clara. I know you saw it. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Oliver and I have been together for 6 months. It's over between us, Rowan. Accept it, and maybe we can keep this civil. Civil? Right. Because threatening to keep my son away from me was the height of civility. I typed back, "There's a third option." Then I started planning. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began gathering evidence. Clara had always been careless with her paperwork, leaving contracts and client files scattered around her home office. I'd helped her organize them plenty of times, so I knew where everything was kept. What I found made me freeze. Property records that didn't match the county database, client signatures that looked suspiciously similar across different documents, travel expenses that didn't align with any legitimate business trips. Clara wasn't just cheating on me, she was running some kind of fraud operation through her agency. And Oliver Kane's construction company had been getting a lot of contracts from Clara's clients lately. I photographed everything, uploaded it to a secure cloud drive, and made copies. Then I started following the money trail. Clara's personal account showed regular deposits that didn't match her commission schedule. Oliver's business account, which I accessed through his carelessly saved passwords on Clara's laptop, showed payments from shell companies that traced back to properties Clara had supposedly sold. They weren't just having an affair, they were running a con. By noon, I had enough evidence to bury them both, but I wasn't ready to play that card yet. First, I wanted to see how deep this rabbit hole went. I drove to Oliver's construction site, a half-finished strip mall on the outskirts of town. His truck was parked out front, a lifted Chevy Silverado with custom rims and a Kane construction decal across the back window. Real subtle. I parked across the street and waited. Around 1 p.m., Oliver emerged from the building, hard hat in hand, talking loudly on his phone. Even from a distance, I could hear his obnoxious laugh echoing across the parking lot. "Yeah, babe, the Hartford deal went through," he was saying. "Your husband's too stupid to figure it out. We'll be set by Christmas." Babe. He was talking to Clara, about me. I watched him climb into his truck and drive off, probably heading to some overpriced gym to work on his already ridiculous physique. The man had the subtlety of a freight train and apparently the intelligence to match. That evening, I picked up Sam from school as usual. He was quiet during the drive home, staring out the window with the kind of thoughtful expression that reminded me he was getting older, more perceptive. "Dad?" he said as we pulled into our driveway. "Yeah, buddy?" "Is Mom okay? She's been acting weird lately." I chose my words carefully. "Sometimes adults go through difficult times, Sam. But whatever happens between your mom and me, it doesn't change how much we both love you." He nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can we order pizza tonight? Mom said she'd be working late again." "Sure thing." Clara didn't come home until after midnight. I heard her trying to be quiet, slipping off her heels in the hallway, but I was wide awake in bed, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. She slid into bed beside me, smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Good day at work?" I asked quietly. She stiffened. "Fine, just tired." "The Peterson property close okay?" There was no Peterson property. I'd made it up on the spot. "Yeah," she said quickly. "Finally got the paperwork sorted." Liar. I rolled over and pretended to sleep, but my mind was racing. Tomorrow I'd start making some calls. Clara wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd picked the wrong opponent. I'd spent my entire career solving problems, finding bugs in complex systems, and making broken things work again. Clara and Oliver had made one critical error in their planning. They'd underestimated me. Love might be a flat tire on the road to hell, but I was about to show them I knew how to change a tire. The next morning, Clara left early for a client meeting in New Haven. I waited until her car disappeared around the corner, then made my first call. "Brennan, Walsh and Associates," the receptionist answered. "I need to speak with Janet Walsh about filing for divorce," I said. "It's urgent." Janet Walsh had handled my buddy Brett's divorce 3 years ago. She was thorough, ruthless, and had a reputation for protecting father's rights in custody battles. If Clara wanted to play hardball, I'd bring in a professional. The appointment was set for that afternoon. Next, I called my office and took a personal day. Then I got to work. Clara's home office was a disaster zone of client files, property listings, and contract drafts. She'd always claimed to be creatively organized, which apparently meant shoving important documents into random folders and hoping for the best. I started with her computer. Clara had always been terrible with passwords, usually variations of Sam's birthday or our anniversary. It took me 3 tries to crack her email account. What I found there made my stomach turn. Months of correspondence with Oliver, starting innocent enough, but quickly turning explicit. Details about their business arrangement mixed with romantic planning, references to the mark and keeping him in the dark that clearly meant me. But the worst part was a message from last week. Oliver says we need to move faster. If Rowan gets suspicious, we might have to cut and run. I can probably get 70% in a divorce if I play it right. He's too soft to fight me on custody. Too soft. We'd see about that. I printed everything, organized it by date, and cross-referenced it with Clara's financial records. The pattern was clear: fake property sales, inflated commissions, and kickbacks to Oliver's construction company. They'd been systematically defrauding clients and splitting the profits. My phone rang. Brett from work. "Dude, you sound terrible," he said when I answered. "What's going on?" Brett was one of those genuinely good guys who still believed in things like loyalty and friendship. We'd started at the company the same week 5 years ago, and he'd become the closest thing I had to a best friend. "Clara's having an affair," I said bluntly, "and she's trying to blackmail me for custody of Sam." "Jesus, man. I'm sorry. What do you need?" "Can you cover for me for a few days? I need to handle some things." "Of course. Anything else?" I hesitated. If I asked you to help me with something that might be ethically questionable but completely legal, would you do it? Brett was quiet for a moment. "Is it about protecting Sam?" "Yeah." "Then count me in." That's what I liked about Brett. No complicated moral calculations, no hand-wringing, just simple loyalty. After we hung up, I drove to Oliver's job site again. This time, I came prepared. I'd stopped at a hardware store and picked up a few supplies: spray paint, a utility knife, and some industrial-strength fish fertilizer that smelled like pure misery. Nothing illegal, nothing that would cause permanent damage. Just a message. Oliver's truck was parked in the same spot as yesterday. The construction site was busy with workers, but no one paid attention to another guy in work clothes walking through the parking lot. I worked quickly. The spray paint went on the hood, "Home Wrecker," in bright red letters. The utility knife took care of all 4 tires, not slashing them, just letting the air out. The fish fertilizer went under the truck, where it would create a lasting aromatic impression. The whole operation took less than 5 minutes. I was back in my car across the street when Oliver emerged from the building an hour later. The string of profanity that erupted from him when he saw his truck was audible from 50 yards away. He stormed around the vehicle, taking photos with his phone, probably planning to file an insurance claim. Then he made a call. Even from my distance, I could tell he was furious. "Clara, someone messed with my truck," he shouted. "This has to be your husband. What did you tell him?" I couldn't hear her response, but Oliver's reaction was priceless. "What do you mean?" he said. "There's a third option. What the hell does that mean?" I started my car and drove away, smiling for the first time in weeks. That afternoon, I met with Janet Walsh. She was a small woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of intense focus that made you understand why she was so successful. "Mr. Pierce," she said, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "This is quite comprehensive. Your wife has made several significant mistakes, such as threatening to withhold custody in writing, for starters. Judges don't look favorably on parental alienation tactics, and this financial evidence suggests fraud, which could impact any settlement discussions." She leaned back in her chair. "What are your goals here? Full custody, asset protection, or do you want to pursue criminal charges?" "I want my son protected, and I want Clara to understand that actions have consequences, but I don't want Sam to watch his mother get arrested." Janet nodded approvingly. "Reasonable. We'll file first, citing attempted extortion and demanding an emergency custody hearing. The financial irregularities will speak for themselves." "How long will this take?" "With evidence this strong, we could have preliminary orders within a week. Your wife picked the wrong fight, Mr. Pierce." I left Janet's office feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. That evening, Clara came home early for once. She seemed agitated, pacing around the kitchen while I helped Sam with his homework. "Did you have something to do with what happened to Oliver's truck today?" she demanded. I looked up from Sam's math worksheet. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Someone vandalized his truck, spray-painted it, and let the air out of his tires." "Sounds like he made some enemies," I said mildly. "Maybe he shouldn't go around breaking up families." Clara's face went white. "You know." "I know a lot of things, Clara. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sam looked up from his homework, sensing the tension. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. "Why don't you finish up in your room? I'll check it later." After Sam left, Clara sat down across from me. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, almost apologetic. "Rowan, Save it," I cut her off. "I found your emails. I know about the fake property deals. I know about the money you and Oliver have been stealing. I know everything." She stared at me in shock. "You went through my computer? You threatened to take my son away from me. Did you really think I'd just roll over?" Clara's vulnerability evaporated, replaced by the cold calculation I'd been seeing more of lately. "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo of one of her forged contracts. "Want to bet?" For the first time since this whole mess started, Clara looked genuinely frightened. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "I want you to understand something," I said, standing up. "I spent 12 years thinking you were the smartest person I knew. Turns out you're just the most ruthless. But you made one mistake, Clara." "What's that?" "You confused kindness with weakness. Tomorrow you'll understand the difference." I walked upstairs to check on Sam, leaving Clara sitting alone at the kitchen table. Through his bedroom door, I could hear her making frantic phone calls. Let her panic. The real fun was just beginning. I filed for divorce at 8 a.m. sharp, beating Clara to the courthouse by several hours. Janet Walsh had prepared everything perfectly. Emergency custody motions, asset protection orders, and a detailed affidavit outlining Clara's attempted extortion and financial irregularities. By the time Clara's lawyer called her that afternoon, the legal machinery was already in motion. But legal proceedings moved slowly, and I wasn't in a patient mood. Clara worked at Winfield Properties, a boutique real estate agency downtown that catered to upscale clients. She'd been there for 6 years, building a reputation as one of their top performers. Her boss, Margaret Winfield, was old-school Hartford money, the kind of woman who valued reputation above almost everything else. I knew this because Clara had complained about Margaret's outdated standards countless times over family dinners. Today, those outdated standards were going to work in my favor. I arrived at the Winfield Properties office at 2 p.m., carrying a manila envelope thick with documentation. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, who'd always been friendly when I'd stopped by to pick up Clara, greeted me with a smile. "Hi, Mr. Pierce. Are you here to see Clara? She's in the conference room with Mrs. Winfield and the Peterson account team." Perfect. The Peterson account was one of their biggest clients. "Actually, I have some documents that might be relevant to that meeting," I said, holding up the envelope. "Could you let them know I'm here?" Ashley buzzed the conference room. "Clara, your husband is here with some documents for the Peterson meeting." I could hear Clara's sharp intake of breath through the intercom. "Tell him I'll be right out." "Actually," I said loudly enough for the intercom to pick up, "this concerns everyone in that room. It's about property fraud and forged contracts." The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret Winfield's voice came through the intercom, crisp and authoritative. "Send him in." The conference room was exactly what you'd expect from a high-end real estate agency. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, and abstract art that probably cost more than my car. Clara sat frozen at one end of the table, her face pale. Margaret Winfield, a silver-haired woman in her 60s, sat at the head like a queen holding court. 3 other agents and 2 clients completed the group. "Mr. Pierce?" Margaret said coolly. "Ashley mentioned something about fraud?" "I'm afraid so," I said, opening the envelope. "I've discovered that my wife has been falsifying property records, forging client signatures, and inflating commissions. I thought you should know before it becomes a legal matter." I spread the documents across the table, side-by-side comparisons of signatures, property records that didn't match county databases, and financial statements showing irregular payments. Clara found her voice. "Rowan, what are you doing?" "Just helping everyone stay organized," I said pleasantly. "You always said you appreciated my attention to detail." Margaret picked up one of the signature comparisons, studying it through her reading glasses. The Peterson clients leaned forward, examining documents with their names on them. "Mrs. Peterson," I said, addressing the female client directly, "did you sign this addendum to your property sale last month?" She looked at the document, frowning. "This isn't my signature." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I think we need to discuss this privately," Margaret said, her voice calm. "Mr. Peterson, Mrs. Peterson, perhaps we could reschedule this meeting?" The clients gathered their things quickly, shooting nervous glances at Clara as they left. The other agents followed, leaving just Margaret, Clara, and me in the conference room. "Explain," Margaret said to Clara. Clara's composure cracked completely. "It's not what it looks like. Rowan is trying to destroy me because I want a divorce." "Is that your signature or not?" Margaret asked, pointing to the Peterson document. Clara couldn't answer. I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording, one of Clara's voicemails to Oliver from last week. Her voice filled the room. "The Winfield contracts are ready. I matched the signatures perfectly this time. Margaret will never know." Margaret Winfield had built her reputation over 30 years in Hartford real estate. She'd survived market crashes, economic downturns, and countless competitors. But she'd never survived a scandal, because she'd never allowed one to happen. "Clara," she said quietly, "you're suspended pending a full investigation. Security will escort you out." Clara turned to me, her eyes blazing with fury and desperation. "You bastard! You're destroying everything." "No," I said, standing up. "I'm just making sure everyone knows who you really are." Security arrived within minutes. 2 professional, courteous men who'd clearly handled this kind of situation before. Clara gathered her personal items from her desk while half the office watched in stunned silence. As she was escorted to the elevator, she turned back to me one last time. "This isn't over," she said. "Yes," I replied, "it is." That evening, I picked up Sam from school as usual. He was quieter than normal during the drive home, and I could tell something was bothering him. "Dad?" he said as we pulled into our driveway. "What's up, buddy?" "Tommy's mom said she saw Mom leaving her work with security guards. Is Mom in trouble?" I turned off the engine and faced my son. He deserved honesty, but not more than he could handle. "Your mom made some mistakes at work," I said carefully. "Sometimes when adults make mistakes, there are consequences, but that doesn't change how much she loves you." Sam nodded thoughtfully. "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my voice steady. "We're having some serious problems, Sam. I don't know what's going to happen yet." "Will I still get to see both of you?" "Always," I said firmly. "No matter what happens between your mom and me, we'll both always be your parents." He seemed satisfied with that answer, but I could see the worry in his eyes. This whole situation was hardest on him, and he didn't even know the full scope of it yet. That night, after Sam was asleep, I sat in my home office planning the next phase. Clara's professional reputation was in ruins, but Oliver was still out there, probably thinking he could weather this storm. Time to prove him wrong. I'd done some research on Kane construction. Oliver had built his business on relationships with local real estate agents and property developers. His reputation was everything. One major scandal could destroy years of networking and referrals. I opened my laptop and started typing. By morning, every major construction contractor, property developer, and real estate agency in Hartford County would receive an email detailing Oliver Kane's involvement in property fraud, complete with documentation and audio evidence. The subject line read, "Protecting our industry's integrity." I hit send and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. The neighborhood barbecue was Margaret Chen's idea. Every summer, she organized a block party in Riverside Park to build community connections. Usually, I found excuses to skip it. Too much small talk with people I barely knew. But this year, I had a specific reason to attend. Clara would be there. She always loved these social events, using them to network and show off. Even suspended from her job and facing a divorce, she wouldn't be able to resist making an appearance. I was right. She arrived at 3 p.m. wearing a sundress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, her hair perfectly styled despite everything falling apart around her. She'd brought a homemade potato salad and was making the rounds, chatting with neighbors like nothing had happened. I watched from across the park as she worked the crowd. Clara had always been good at this, making people feel important, remembering their kids' names, asking about their jobs. It's what made her such an effective real estate agent. Too bad she'd thrown it all away for a muscle-bound idiot with more ego than brains. "Rowan," called out Jim Peterson, our next-door neighbor. "How's the tech world treating you?" "Can't complain," I said, joining a group of neighbors around the grill, "though I've been dealing with some interesting security issues lately." "Oh yeah? What kind of security issues?" asked Sarah Martinez, who lived across the street. "Identity theft, mostly. Someone's been forging signatures on legal documents, creating fake business transactions. It's amazing how much damage one person can do to multiple families." The group was paying attention now. Nothing gets suburbanites more interested than the possibility of scandal. "That's terrible," said Jim. "Did you catch whoever was doing it?" "Oh yes," I said, glancing meaningfully toward Clara. "Turns out it was someone we all trusted, someone who had access to personal information through their job." Sarah followed my gaze. "You don't mean—" "I probably shouldn't say more," I said, pulling out my phone. "But the evidence is pretty damning." I showed them a photo of one of Clara's forged contracts, carefully cropped to hide identifying information, but clear enough to show the signature discrepancies. "Jesus," whispered Jim. "How long was this going on?" "Months? Maybe longer. The really sad part is she had an accomplice, some contractor who was getting kickbacks from the fake deals. By now, other neighbors had drifted over, drawn by the serious tone of our conversation. Clara was still working the crowd on the other side of the park, oblivious to the bomb I was dropping on her social life. "Did you report it to the police?" asked Margaret Chen. "We're handling it through civil court for now," I said. "But if more victims come forward—" I let the implication hang in the air. Sarah Martinez was staring at Clara with new understanding. "Wait, didn't Clara help the Johnsons sell their house last year? And she recommended that contractor. What was his name?" "Oliver Kane," I said helpfully. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. "Do you think—" "I can't speculate about specific cases," I said. "But if anyone has concerns about recent real estate transactions, they should probably have them reviewed by an independent attorney." The crowd was buzzing now, putting pieces together, remembering interactions with Clara and Oliver. I excused myself and walked toward the playground, where Sam was playing with some other kids. That's when Clara spotted me. She marched across the park, her friendly mask slipping to reveal the fury underneath. Several neighbors watched as she approached, sensing drama. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed when she reached me. "Enjoying a community barbecue," I said mildly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "You're telling people I'm a criminal." "I'm sharing information about identity theft and fraud. If people draw their own conclusions about specific individuals, that's not my responsibility." Clara's voice was rising, drawing more attention. "You're destroying my reputation over a personal dispute." "No," I said, still calm. "I'm protecting our neighbors from someone who's been stealing from them." "I never stole anything." I pulled out my phone and played another audio clip. Clara's voice discussing inflated commissions with Oliver. Her words carried clearly across the park. "The markup is only 10%. They'll never notice, and we split the difference." The crowd of neighbors had grown larger, everyone straining to hear. Clara looked around desperately, realizing she was surrounded by people she'd been schmoozing just minutes earlier. "That's taken out of context," she said desperately. "Really? Let me play the full conversation." I started to scroll through my phone, but Clara lunged for it, trying to snatch it away from me. I stepped back, and she stumbled, her heel catching in the grass. "Give me that phone," she shouted. "Clara, you're making a scene," I said, holding the device out of her reach. She tried again, grabbing for my arm. This time, I walked backward toward the park's pavilion, where someone had set up a projector for a slideshow of neighborhood photos. "You want everyone to hear the truth?" I said, connecting my phone to the projector. "Fine." Clara's text messages appeared on the large screen, 20 feet wide for everyone to see. Messages about the mark and keeping him in the dark and splitting the profits. Messages to Oliver about forging signatures and inflating prices. The crowd was silent, reading every word. Clara stood frozen in horror as her private conversations played out in public. Then she turned and ran, pushing through the crowd toward the parking lot. I disconnected my phone and faced the neighbors. Many looked shocked, some angry, a few sympathetic. "I'm sorry you all had to see that," I said. "But some of you might be victims of this fraud. You deserve to know." Sarah Martinez was the first to approach me. "Rowan, Clara handled our refinancing last year. She recommended Oliver Kane for some work on our kitchen. Do you think you should have an attorney review all the paperwork?" I said gently. "I can give you the name of someone who specializes in real estate fraud." By the time I left the barbecue an hour later, I'd given out Janet Walsh's contact information to 6 different families. Clara's social destruction was complete, but more importantly, her victims would finally get justice. Sam was quiet on the drive home. He'd been playing with friends during the confrontation, but kids always sense when something important is happening. "Dad?" he said as we pulled into our driveway. "Yeah, buddy?" "Is Mom really in trouble?" I chose my words carefully. "Your mom made some bad choices, Sam. Now she has to face the consequences." "Will she go to jail?" "I don't think so, but she might not be able to work in real estate anymore." Sam nodded solemnly. Tommy's dad said she was crying when she left the park. That hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything Clara had done, seeing her broken and humiliated in front of our neighbors wasn't as satisfying as I'd thought it would be. But then I remembered her threatening to take Sam away from me, and my sympathy evaporated. Actions have consequences. Clara was finally learning that lesson. The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning. By Wednesday night, Clara was desperate. She'd been staying at a cheap motel since Margaret Winfield had her escorted out of the office. Oliver had apparently decided she was too much liability and stopped returning her calls. Her few remaining friends were keeping their distance, afraid of being associated with the scandal. I knew all this because Mia, Clara's former best friend, had called me. "Rowan, I'm worried about her," Mia said. "She's been drinking, making crazy plans. She keeps talking about taking Sam and disappearing." Mia had been Clara's partner in crime for years, enabling her worst impulses and covering for her lies. But even she had limits, apparently. "What kind of plans?" I asked. "She wants to pick Sam up from school tomorrow and drive to her sister's place in California. She thinks if she can get him out of Connecticut, the custody order won't matter." Parental kidnapping. Clara was really losing it. "Thanks for the heads up," I said. "I should have told you about the affair months ago," Mia said quietly. "I'm sorry, Rowan. I thought it was just a phase." "It's not your fault, Mia." But it kind of was. Mia had known Clara was cheating, known she was planning to destroy our marriage, and said nothing. Now she wanted absolution because Clara's self-destruction was making her uncomfortable. I called Janet Walsh immediately. "We need to move the custody hearing up," I told her. "Clara's planning to take Sam and leave the state." "I'll file for an emergency restraining order first thing in the morning," Janet said. "Can you keep Sam home from school tomorrow?" "Already planned on it." Thursday morning, I woke Sam up early and made his favorite breakfast, chocolate chip pancakes with way too much syrup. He was confused about missing school, but I told him we were having a special Father-Son Day. At 8 a.m., Janet called with an update. "The restraining order is approved," she said. "Clara is prohibited from removing Sam from Connecticut pending the custody hearing. I've notified his school and the local police." "What if she tries anyway?" "Then she'll be arrested for violating a court order. Judges don't look kindly on parents who try to flee with children." At 9:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sam's school. "Mr. Pierce? This is Principal Davis. A woman claiming to be Sam's aunt is here trying to pick him up. She says there's a family emergency." "What does she look like?" "Blonde, well-dressed, very insistent. She's getting agitated because we won't release Sam without proper authorization." "Clara. She'd tried to pose as her own sister to get around the restraining order." "Call the police," I said. "That woman is my wife, and she's violating a court order." I grabbed Sam and drove to the school, arriving just as 2 patrol cars pulled up. Through the office windows, I could see Clara arguing with Principal Davis, gesturing wildly. When the officers entered the building, Clara's voice carried into the parking lot. "You don't understand. His father is dangerous. I'm trying to protect my son." Sam looked confused and scared. "Dad, why are the police at my school?" "Your mom is having some problems, buddy. She made some bad choices, and now the police have to make sure everyone stays safe." We watched from the car as Clara was escorted out in handcuffs. She saw us and started shouting, "Rowan, you can't do this. He's my son too." Sam pressed against me, frightened by his mother's behavior. "Is Mom going to jail?" "Just for a little while," I said, holding him tight. "She broke some rules, and there are consequences." The custody hearing that afternoon was a formality. Clara's lawyer tried to argue that she was emotionally distressed and not thinking clearly, but Judge Morrison had seen enough parental kidnapping attempts to recognize the pattern. "Mrs. Pierce," the judge said sternly, "attempting to remove your child from the state in violation of a restraining order demonstrates exactly why emergency custody was necessary. Until you can prove you're capable of putting your son's welfare above your own desires, custody will remain with your husband." Clara broke down completely, sobbing in the courtroom as the judge outlined the supervised visitation schedule. She could see Sam for 2 hours every Saturday, with a social worker present. Oliver didn't even show up to support her. He was dealing with his own problems. 3 families had filed lawsuits against Kane Construction for fraud, and the state licensing board was investigating his business practices. That evening, I sat Sam down for a serious conversation. "Your mom is going through a very difficult time," I explained. "She made some mistakes that hurt a lot of people, including us. The judge decided you should live with me for now." "Is it because of what she did at the barbecue?" Sam asked. "Kids notice everything." "Partly, but mostly because she tried to take you away without permission, which scared the judge." "Will I still see her?" "Yes, but only when a social worker is there to make sure everyone stays safe." Sam thought about this for a long moment. "Dad, are you going to be okay?" The question caught me off guard. My 10-year-old son was worried about me. "I'm going to be fine, buddy. We both are. It might take some time, but things will get better." "Good," he said, hugging me tightly. "I don't want to lose you too." That night, after Sam was asleep, I sat in my home office reviewing the wreckage of Clara's life. Her career was over, her reputation destroyed, her friends gone. Oliver was facing bankruptcy and possible criminal charges. The fraud investigation was expanding to include other properties and clients. I should have felt satisfied. Justice was being served, consequences were being faced, and Sam was safe. Instead, I felt empty. Revenge, it turned out, was a lot like debugging code. You identify the problem, trace it back to its source, and fix it. But fixing the code doesn't undo the damage it caused while it was running. Clara had destroyed our marriage, threatened our son, and stolen from innocent people. She deserved everything that was happening to her. But she was still the woman I'd loved for 12 years, the mother of my child, the person I'd once trusted with my life. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of moving forward. New routines, new relationships, new dreams. Sam and I would build something better from the ashes of what Clara had burned down. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve for what we'd lost and what we'd never get back. 6 weeks later, the final hearing was scheduled. Clara had spent most of that time in a court-mandated rehabilitation program, supposedly dealing with her emotional issues and poor decision-making. Oliver had declared bankruptcy and left town, his construction business dissolved and his reputation in ruins. The media had picked up the story. Local real estate agent charged with fraud made for good headlines, especially when it involved affairs, fake contracts, and attempted kidnapping. Clara's mugshot had been on the front page of the Hartford Courant for 3 days running. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt tired. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters when I arrived that morning. Janet Walsh met me at the entrance, looking grimly satisfied. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Ready for this to be over." It will be. Clara's lawyer is recommending she accept our settlement offer. Full custody to you, supervised visitation for her, and she pays restitution to the fraud victims. What about criminal charges? The DA is offering a plea deal. 2 years probation, community service, and permanent loss of her real estate license. She'll avoid jail time if she cooperates fully with the investigation. We walked through the courthouse lobby, past reporters shouting questions I didn't answer. This whole mess had become a circus, and I just wanted to get Sam back to some kind of normal life. The courtroom was packed. Clara sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. She'd lost weight during rehab, and her usually perfect appearance was subdued. No makeup, hair pulled back simply, wearing a conservative gray suit that made her look like she was attending her own funeral. Maybe she was. Judge Morrison called the court to order, and Clara's lawyer stood to address the court. "Your Honor, my client accepts full responsibility for her actions and agrees to the terms outlined in the settlement agreement." Just like that, it was over. 12 years of marriage, 6 months of investigation, and weeks of legal proceedings. Concluded with a simple statement of acceptance. Clara was required to make a formal apology to the court and the victims. She stood slowly, her hands shaking as she read from a prepared statement. "I take full responsibility for my actions and the harm I caused to my family, my clients, and my community. I betrayed the trust of people who believed in me, and I deeply regret the pain I've caused, especially to my son." Her voice broke on the last words, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the woman I'd married, vulnerable, human, broken by her own choices. Then Judge Morrison dismissed the court, and it was truly finished. The reporters were waiting outside, cameras rolling, as Clara emerged from the courthouse. She tried to push through the crowd, but they surrounded her, shouting questions about the fraud, the affair, the attempted kidnapping. "Mrs. Pierce, do you have any comment about the victims of your fraud? What do you say to families who lost money because of your actions? Are you planning to appeal the custody decision?" Clara stopped walking and turned to face the cameras. For a moment, I thought she might break down completely. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the nearest camera. "I made terrible choices that hurt innocent people," she said clearly. "I can't undo the damage I've caused, but I can make sure it never happens again. I'm sorry." Then she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of downtown Hartford. I never saw her again. The supervised visits lasted exactly 3 sessions. Clara was supposed to see Sam every Saturday for 2 hours at a family services center, with a social worker monitoring their interactions. The first visit was awkward, but civil. Sam was polite but distant. Clara was trying too hard to be the fun mom she'd never been. The second visit was worse. Clara broke down crying when Sam asked why she'd tried to take him away from his dad. The social worker had to end the session early. Clara didn't show up for the 3rd visit, or the 4th, or any visit after that. The social worker called to explain that Clara had signed papers voluntarily terminating her parental rights. She'd left a letter for Sam to be given to him when he turned 18. Some parents can't handle the guilt, the social worker explained. They convince themselves that disappearing is better for the child than facing what they've done. Maybe Clara was right. Maybe Sam was better off without the constant reminder of her betrayal and the chaos she'd brought into our lives. Or maybe she was just taking the easy way out, one last time. Sam took the news better than I expected. He was sad, but not devastated. Clara had been pulling away from him for months before the affair came to light, and kids are remarkably adaptable. "Will I see her again?" he asked. "I don't know, buddy. Maybe someday, if she gets her life together." "Okay," he said, then went back to his video game. That was it. No tears, no drama, just acceptance that his mother had chosen to walk away. 6 months later, we moved to a new house across town. Fresh start, new neighborhood, no memories of Clara in every room. Sam made friends quickly, joined the soccer team, and started calling our house home instead of Dad's place. I dated occasionally, but nothing serious. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, and I wasn't ready to risk Sam's stability for my own loneliness. Brett helped me renovate the new house, turning it into something that was ours, not just a place we landed after the divorce. We built a deck, painted Sam's room his favorite color, and installed a basketball hoop in the driveway. "You seem better," Brett observed one Saturday as we were staining the deck. "I feel better, lighter somehow." "Any regrets about how it all went down?" I considered the question carefully. Clara had lost everything: her career, her reputation, her family, her friends. Oliver had fled town in disgrace. The fraud victims had gotten their money back through insurance and restitution, but the trust they'd lost couldn't be restored. "No," I said finally. "She made her choices. I just made sure there were consequences." "Think you'll ever hear from her again?" "I hope not." And I meant it. Clara had burned down everything good in her life, chasing something she thought would make her happy. She'd discovered too late that happiness built on lies and betrayal doesn't last. I'd learned something too, that love without respect is just dependency, and that sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions. Sam and I were building something new now, a life based on honesty, trust, and the understanding that actions matter. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was better than the lie we'd been living. Clara had wanted 70% of everything in the divorce. Instead, she'd gotten 100% of the consequences. And we'd gotten 100% of the chance to start over. 2 years later, I got a postcard from Seattle. No return address, no signature, just a picture of the Space Needle and 4 words written on the back. "I'm sorry, be happy." I threw it away without showing it to Sam. Some chapters are better left closed. The revenge I'd planned had been complete and devastating. Clara lost her career, her reputation, her family, and her future in Hartford. Oliver lost his business and fled town in disgrace. Justice was served, consequences were faced, and victims were compensated. But the real victory wasn't their destruction. It was what Sam and I built from the wreckage. A life based on truth instead of lies, trust instead of betrayal, and the knowledge that we could survive anything as long as we faced it together. Clara had tried to take everything from me. Instead, she'd given me the chance to discover what really mattered. In the end, that was the best revenge of all.